Come January 1st, Michael Bloomberg, not the only local New York City leader who will be out of a job. So too will Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. Kelly and Bloomberg's legacies, it would seem, intertwined, with more for Kelly perhaps riding on the way that people view the program that's come to define the administration, at least when it comes to law enforcement, stop and frisk. Now, both Kelly and Bloomberg kept relatively quiet about the campaigns and the people seeking to succeed them as Election Day approached. But for Kelly, that was then and this is now. He let loose. He's throwing a few bombshells as it goes out the door. And for more, I want to bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman.
Well, Rich, Kelly finally went on the record with a reporter, and that reporter was with Playboy. Coming up in this week or this month's December issue. Turns out the interview has legs as well. When the reporter asked Kelly about the mayoral candidates, specifically, do you think they were just full of blank? Kelly answered, absolutely. Sounding bitter, Kelly added, it just goes to show you what some politicians will do. They'll say or do anything to get elected. I know all these people. They all claim to be my friends or friends of mine until their mayoral campaigns. Would Kelly work for Mayor de Blasio or any other Democrat? Quote, I don't want to discuss it. Really the only time he wasn't opening up in the interview. Kelly also using the interview to defend his record as police commissioner with a laser focus on the data he relied so heavily on. Quote, notice what they, his critics, never talk about, he said, the lives being saved. During the past 11 years, we had 7,363 fewer murders than we had in the 11 years before. Last year, the homicide rate was the lowest in at least 50 years. I know we're saving lives, he said, and I know we're doing the right thing. And saying expectations on him and the NYPD when he took over after 9/11, quote, it wasn't a question of crime was going to go up, it was by how much. It was a pessimistic time. People were expecting more mayhem to break out. People were leaving the city. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. For more on this and a lot of other subjects this evening, let's bring in our panel. First up, Democratic political consultant Michael Tobman, and also here, political journalist and author Dominic Carter. The outgoing five-term Rockland County executive. We don't hear five-term too often here. He's been the top man in the county government there since elected back in '93. Republican C. Scott Vanderhoff, and Andrew, who you've met as well. And Dominic, I'll start on you with the outgoing police commissioner. It's pretty clear he doesn't like the final chapter on how it's being written and how he's going out the door. To be fair, especially compared to predecessors and certainly the former mayor, he worked really hard in the beginning trying to win over some of the black community and some others. And to be fair to him, he was pretty successful on it. Forget about how he's leaving office. I think people forget the first chapter of his time, in the most recent time at least, at Police Plaza.
I say this objectively. On this one, I'm in Ray Kelly's corner. I don't think any of us would like the way history, if you had the legacy that Ray Kelly does, the way history is going down now, in terms of, you can understand the term pandering when you look at this election. The fact of the matter is, when Ray Kelly came on board, and I remember it well, there were few of us that believed that it was possible for crime to continue to go down. Everyone just knew it was going to go up. The question was, as he said in that interview with Playboy, was how much. And instead, Ray Kelly, you know, we can agree to disagree on stop and frisk, but he kept the numbers coming down. Ray Kelly took a lot of heat from the PBA. Whenever there was a shooting of an African American, it was unheard of for a New York City police commissioner to go visit the family of the wounded man and say on some occasions, we were wrong. This is what Ray Kelly did.
So explain, though, the dichotomy, though. You have a police commissioner who broke with policy from the prior administration and went to the black churches. He went to do very clearly, right? But yet, does the program that's defined, and we got the data from the Attorney General yesterday, so it's not even conjecture, largely ineffective if you look at the black and white numbers here, and I'm not trying to be cute with the analogy. How does that same guy, it's hard to kind of,
it's not hard to understand if you sort of reject the underlying premise, is that it's not stop and frisk that's come to define the last months of the Bloomberg administration and Ray Kelly's tenure as police commissioner, but rather it is consistent with their inability to modulate their tone and to admit that maybe we should revisit this, maybe we should take another look at this.
They won't back up one iota.
Not one step back. So in that way, it's consistent with the report cards for the schools. It's consistent with what's happened with stop and frisk. It's consistent with a lot of ways that they just don't take one step back, and they get short-tempered, and they get testy.
It's really personal. You also heard it in one of the points in the interview. Ray Kelly says, hey, I can go up to, I don't know if he said 125th Street or whatever, and basically, black guys will come up to me and hug me, right? They want to take a picture with me, right? And then they'll turn around and say, you know, that I'm the face here of the profiling program.
Richard, the truth of the matter is, and I'm not saying this being unfairly in Kelly's side, Kelly is more popular in any community you can imagine or name than any of the Democrats that ran for mayor.
This is what happens in a third term. Now, 5 terms is a whole different story, and it's New York City. But third terms for mayors in New York City, this is what happens. People get testy. People get tired. We saw with the Koch administration. We even saw, though, I believe, a great governor. We saw at the tail end of Pataki's third term. It's just.
And the other thing is that politicians pander. I mean, the bottom line is that they're trying to find a way to distinguish themselves, and as you say, and I agree with you, they get themselves caught in their own little corner. And here they did, and the statistics don't lie. I mean, you look at those numbers, and they're remarkable. And that's what I think is interesting, because I think the individuals, the citizens, appreciate it. I think they feel safer in New York City.
It's shocking that this got away from them, because although the messenger, Paul Brown, and we discussed it on this show, said, some communities, some cultures dedicate their policing resources to protect middle-class, stable communities. New York City puts its policing resources where there is crime. That those happen to be communities of color. Let's figure this out. It just got away from them, and they were right, and they lost it.
Though it should be pointed out that crime rates are down across the country. No, not every big city has crime rates that are going down, and New York City has generally been ahead of the curve on it.
Right, but they don't match New York City's numbers.
That's correct. That's correct. But there is a downturn in crime across the country. I find it interesting that, you know, on his way out the door, there's a little concern for legacy that, and he'll say, I bet you Ray Kelly would be like, I'm not concerned about my legacy.
And they pushed really hard. We heard a lot of the backstory that came out late in the campaign, even after. Ray Kelly was pushed repeatedly to try and get in the race here as the Republican nominee. They'd clear the decks for him. They'd do everything. He wouldn't bite here. I've been curious how much closer it might have been. You know, I'm curious about governing in this. Andy Spano, nice guy, but I was there for the very end of when the campaign went down, and I moderated that debate. And there was an element of Captain Queeg where, listen, they're all out to get me, you know, just get out of my way. I know what I'm doing. I've been at this long enough. Let me do it. To a degree with Bloomberg, like many third terms, it just had to go downhill. How do you combat that? You were there 5 terms. At some point, you have to reinvent it. How do you fight the inertia which says, I've been here long enough, I know this more than anybody else, I don't want outside input, and not turn off the electorate in the process?
Well, you know, one of the things I think is interesting is the electorate has a fairly short memory. And so one of the things you need to continually do is say, look, you may be upset about issue X, but remember what we did long ago, 4 years ago or 5 years ago or 6 years ago to get
goodwill in the bank.
Yeah, and by continually saying, and I'm not suggesting this is always the way to do it, but by saying, look, this is a bigger mission than that particular issue. What you're talking about is the well-being of our community, being in the county, and not get defensive, because what happens is, especially today in campaigns, it's negative, it's nasty, things are thrown out, the attention span of the people, I think, is much different than it was 20 years ago. So you really need to come and say, look, I know there's an issue with taxes. Let's talk about exactly how it affects you from our perspective, et cetera. But it's I have to say, it's very difficult in today's world.
Got to do it in sound bites, don't you?
You really do, because you've got to pique their interest in order to get to the depth of the substance of what you're trying to sell, which is, look, I'm on the, and by the way, Kelly tried to do this. He said, I'm not interested in my legacy. I'm interested in doing what's right. You know what? People like that.
But you're right. And to this degree, it all came down to messaging. It could have been done different. They could have given a little, but still, you know what I mean? But by being so resistant and coming off that they knew better, that when the AG report came out, it was like a punctuation point. And even Judge Scheinlin, even if it's true or not, they get perceived to be the ones to better get her stripped from the case.
On
you know,
the Democratic side as well. With stop and frisk as the defining issue of the last couple months of the campaign, the candidate of color didn't win the Democratic primary. Some would say the candidate of color did actually win the Democratic primary, but you know, it got away from a lot of people.
Okay, when we come back, everyone, we're going to talk about an anniversary coming up that we may remember at this table here, but for folks who don't know, it was a jarring time when the Long Island Railroad Massacre happened and gunfire erupted here. It riveted not only this region, but really the country here, and it also launched a political career that came out of it. We're going to be joined by the movie's director right after this. Please stay with us.